got any biscuits for sale in there?
Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if this is your first time. This is a book review, and a book review I really want to do now. So I'm going to be working in an hour. I'm at work, but I'm not working yet. I'm here early, and I want to do it now while the book is in my head. So I'm doing it quite quickly, which is really good because I really want to do this review because I thought this was quite a special book actually. This is called Black Buck, and it's by Mateo Askaripour. It came out in early 2021, so a couple of years ago now, and there was a lot of hype for it, and it was a bestseller, but it took me a while to get to it, so I actually bought it in hardback when it came out. It just took me ages to get to it for some reason, and the reason why I bought it was that it was recommended for people who liked the film Sorry to Bother You. So I really, really love that film, Sorry to Bother You. So I bought this thinking it might be a similar kind of tone and a similar kind of satire on what it's like to be black in a white workplace, which is essentially what that film's about. But the film, I don't want to spoil the film, but it goes off in a really crazy direction. And it is actually quite different to this, I think. So it did attract me to the book, which was good, but I'd say a better comparison as far as films go is Get Out by Jordan Peele. So if you like Get Out by Jordan Peele, then this is more like that. So it's just the plot is different. So the plot is more similar to Sorry to Bother You, but the tone of the work and what it does is more like Get Out. I'll tell you what it's about, and then we'll go from there. So Darren is the main character, and he is someone who has got a really strong, close relationship with his mum and with his friends and his girlfriend and the neighbours. And he's a lovely guy who is very intelligent. He went to a very prestigious high school and did really well. And everyone expected him to succeed in life financially and all that sort of stuff. But he didn't. He hasn't really got that much ambition to sort of pursue that so much because he wants to stay close to his mum. That's kind of like the idea of the beginning. That's kind of the setup. And he works at Starbucks, which is the reference here with the cover. So he works at Starbucks at the beginning, and anyway, fairly close to the beginning, he serves this man called Rhett, who just out of nowhere, just this urge that he gets, he starts selling him a coffee that's not his normal coffee. So he has the same coffee every day, this guy, this customer, and he starts persuading him to sell this other coffee. And this guy, Rhett, actually runs a tech startup company, and he's really like impressed with him. And he's this like really successful, important white guy who tells him he wants to employ him in his company, and then gets really pushy and keeps sort of insisting on it, and Darren resists a bit, and then in the end he goes for it. He doesn't really know what the company's about, but he believes that it's worth going for it, and he's getting nagged by his mum to kind of make more of himself, so he's like, okay, I'll investigate this company. And that kind of starts off this plot that ultimately is a journey in quite upsetting and powerful and dramatic racism through the whole thing, but also it explores not only racism, but the idea of what success is, the idea of how your own ambitions can conflict with your natural personality, and you can lose yourself in those ambitions, and how it affects your friendships, how it affects your family. It's got a lot of regret in it, redemption, a little bit of hubris. The plot goes in such a direction that you don't know what's going to happen next, which is really interesting. And you do care for him, but sometimes you really don't like him. There's some archetypes in it. Rhett and Clyde, the two main antagonists in the story, they are quite sort of archetypal. You know, they're not necessarily stereotypes, but they're quite archetypal. So, and to be fair, his relationship with his mum is kind of typical that you see it in a lot of sort of domestic-based fiction. So there are some things that are quite standard, but I think it's really fresh. It reads quite fresh, and you don't know where it's going, and it's really powerful. So straight away, you get this sort of sense, like the drill sergeant in Full Metal Jacket. You get this like really bad treatment in this company that is it's very, there's like an undercurrent feeling that it's about race, but it's not really obvious. It's like microaggressions, but it's really persistent and it's really quite strong. So you notice there, and you do feel sorry for him, and you want him to keep going, but you also feel like you also want him to get out and just find a different company. But anyway, that becomes something else anyway, because the plot changes, and I don't want to do any spoilers because it's best to read this, but it's quite uncomfortable to read sometimes, but in a good way, because what we're doing is we're seeing Mateo talk about what it's like to be black in a white workplace and how you're treated, and there's a lot of wit to it as well. I think he believes in the idea of what those kind of companies do. I think it's either that or he's using that device to give some life advice, because what happens is quite regularly in the book will stop the action to do these sort of life advice, life lesson things that are kind of sales-based advice. So these things in bold will just crop up now and again in the text. And I'll try and get one in the middle of the page, you can see how it works. It's not that often. Clearly I'm seeing it's not that often. Oh, here we go. So it would be like just little nuggets that it'll say to kind of comment on the action. It's almost like a Greek chorus kind of thing. I think that works really well, but it's interesting because I wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards a book that is all about how do you succeed in life, how do you make yourself rich and all that kind of thing. And that ends up what he's trying to do. He sticks to the company despite the awful treatment he gets, because he ends up in this state of mind of wanting to succeed. And just to kind of reinforce this idea that this racism that he faces is like relentless in the book. He straight away is not called Darren by the company, he's called Buck, and hence the name Black Buck. And Black Buck is a racial slur. So straight away he's kind of hit by this as he starts, and he doesn't correct them. He does correct them, but he doesn't correct them for long, and he ends up calling himself Buck. And he changes his whole persona and his personality and becomes this sort of beast of sales. And it does change the way he treats everyone around him. And he becomes a bit of an arse, basically. And without spoiling things, the way that affects the plot and the way that affects his relationship at work, the way it affects his family life is huge. And it's really done well, because you're desperate to find out what happens next, but you don't always sympathise with him, and you don't always empathise with him. At the beginning you do, and then he starts losing it. He starts losing your faith in him. But then there's a lot of redemption at the end, and there's a lot of self-analysis, and some people give him some home truths. His relationship with Soraya, his girlfriend, is really interesting, and that's developed really well. And she's got a very full, rounded personality in the book. She's one of the most developed characters. There's a few other salesmen and saleswomen in the book that, again, are there sort of for the purpose of pulling the plot along and aren't as developed. But that's fine, because that would be true for any book. He's got a really interesting relationship with someone he grew up with, who's basically on the streets, sort of hustling drugs and basically trying to get through each day. And if you like, as more of a stereotype of a sort of young black guy in New York. It's set in New York, trying to get by. That's more of a cliche, but again, it's done really well, because it's the way it's written. It just feels very real, and the way he talks, the way they talk to each other. Jason is this guy's name. Jason feels betrayed by Darren, and feels like he's lost his place he's forgotten who he is, forgotten where he comes from, all that kind of thing. And their relationship, their friendship, their very important lifelong friendship is a big feature of the book. And that changes throughout the book in different ways according to how each of them interact with the plot. Again, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but they have to react differently, and they react to each other differently. So some of them push the plot along, one of them does, and then the other one would react. So that kind of thing's happening. And in the last fifth of the book is really interesting, because that's where things change again to the point where I wasn't expecting this kind of conclusion where Darren becomes something else again. Again, I don't want to spoil it, but it's really interesting. And then you start feeling differently about everybody again, still feeling differently about the plot, and it's compelling. It's uncomfortable to read sometimes. It's a very important book, I think, and it's his debut novel, which is interesting. So we'll see what he does next. And if you're interested in fiction that explores racism and a drama that's got a bit of a Wolf of Wall Street kind of vibe, but not quite as glamorous, I'd say, maybe. A little darker, and obviously from a black perspective, then you'd like this. And I think it's definitely worth a read. I read it really quickly because I couldn't put it down, and I found it just really gripping. And I sometimes I cared about him, sometimes I hated him. He does a few things that just like, what are you doing? He's screaming at the page, what are you doing? And it's interesting because I don't, like I said earlier, I'm not into the self-help, this is how you make lots of money kind of books. But those advice things are more like life lessons. And just the whole tone of the book didn't remove me from the story, even though I wouldn't give the time of day to those kind of companies myself. So yeah, really interesting read. Definitely recommend it, and a very powerful read. Black Buck. Thanks a lot for watching. Let me know if you've read it.
Of what it's like to